When does God sing melodies over us? And it says in, I want to say the book of Zephaniah that he does. I want to say Zephaniah 2, that when we sing that he's joining us. It's cool. Really cool. I'm going to do a couple things I don't normally do this morning. I don't think I've ever given my testimony. And so I'm going to do that this morning. I don't ever do that usually. And the other thing I don't normally ever do is go long. But I am going long this morning. So grab a cup of coffee if you need, because it's going to take a while. No, not really, but it's going to be good. But before we do, I just want to pray. Lord, I think that it's so easy for us to settle into rhythm, to routine. It's so easy for us to forget who you are and what you're capable of. It's so easy for us to relegate you as we go about our lives. So Lord, I pray that this message this morning will accurately convey your power, who you are, who we are in your name, that we might come to you, that we might trade all our fears for peace of mind, all our heaviness for burdens light. Lord, I pray that would be our song, because we know that you are always good. It's in your name. Amen. Okay. Well, last week I did a bit of jumping around, talking about faith. And I actually ended the message by doing a quick analysis of what faith was. And we looked at one of the most well-known verses about faith in the Bible. That's Hebrews 11:1. And it says this: "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." And we talked last week about how perplexing this verse was. Sureness of hope, assurance of things, right? Sure and hope. I didn't know you could be both, right? I thought it'd be one or the other, right? Either I'm sure about something or I'm hopeful about something. Both. And then conviction of things not seen. That's from conviction is a derivative of the Greek word elencho, which means to prove something with evidence. And it made it even more strange because provide something, bring evidence of things that we don't see. I mean, invisible evidence? I mean, it doesn't make it any sense, right? And as we unpacked this last week, faith was all about trusting that God had it all figured out. God has it figured out. Am I a little bit loud, by the way? It seems a little hot. Okay, can you bring me down just a little bit? Thank you. And because I'm going to start yelling here in a minute, and I don't want you guys to go deaf. And although we didn't know what was going to happen next, excuse me. So, although we don't know what's going to happen next in our lives, God does, right? And as long as we put our faith in him, or in other words, as long as we trust that he has it figured out and we let him do what only he can do, it's going to work out one way or another. Believing, being sure of it, it's going to work out. I have no evidence to prove it, but I'm sure that something's going to happen, that God's going to do what he does, and that's what faith is. Anyway, I finished up that message with a challenge for all of you to go live out your faith, right? And I thought to myself, that's a nice way to end a message, just go live out your faith. But you might have been thinking last week, what does that even mean though, Nick? Like, what does that look like for me to live out my faith. And, we did do some examples last week. We kind of ran through some quick glances at Hebrews 11, because in Hebrews 11, past this verse, there's examples of what faith looked like. And, for example, Noah, Hebrews 11, it talks about Noah building an ark. Great example. He built an ark despite that he was super old, despite that he lived in the desert. God told him, build an ark. And Noah had faith that God knew what he was doing, despite that everyone thought he was nuts, despite that his kids probably thought, man, we got to put dad in a home, right? He's losing it. He's building a giant boat in the desert. Noah still did it because he was trusting that God had it figured out. And because of Noah's faith, Noah and his family survived when God hit the reset button on earth, because Noah took his faith and he put it into action. And that was one of the things we looked at last week, but that's a Bible story, right? Super extreme levels of faith going on here, Old Testament stuff. So the question is, how do we apply that kind of faith today to us in the 21st century? And I don't know exactly what that looks like for you. I'm not going to pretend like I do. I don't know exactly what it looks like for you, but I know what it looks like for me. And after a week of kicking around the idea of whether or not I should go in this direction, I'm going to do something totally different today. I'm going to spend the majority of our time together sharing with you how God has been working in my life the last 2 years. I'm going to be very real. I'm going to be very honest. I'm going to share with you 10 miracles. And it's great, too, because then you'll be able to get the pace. Like, he's on miracle number 6. We can make our reservation. Lunch. No, I'm just kidding. But 10 miracles. I've got more. I've got way more miracles. I've probably got like 20 or 30 miracles that have happened into us over the last 2 years, where it's like, how are we going to get rent paid? And then a check shows up, and it's just enough for rent. I mean, just miracle after miracle, stuff like that. But I'm going to give you 10 this morning. 10 miracles that have happened in my life here in the 21st century. Proof that God is still working today, proof that God still calls us, proof that God has it figured out and we need to decide to go with him on faith, and proof of how God provides in supernatural ways that can only be described as his hand at work, and therefore only he can claim the credit. And that's what I'm doing this morning. I'm giving him the credit. He has done all of what I'm going to share with you today. I'm a living testimony of God's power, of his goodness, of his provision. And today I'm going to give him all the credit because he's the one who did it. There's no other way to describe it. I'm going to rapid fire here. Here we go. June 2017. June 2017, I had a friend come to me and say, hey, Nick, you should think about church planting. And I thought, no way. No way. I love where I am. I love my job. I love my house. I love Fairfield. It's a little town. I love people I'm doing life with. I'm comfortable. Remember that. I was comfortable there. I was happy. I was a deputy. I was an EMT. I was a substitute teacher in Fairfield, okay? I officiated weddings and funerals for locals who'd been there forever in Fairfield. I'm visiting people throughout the week. Each week, man, I was fully integrated there, totally happy, totally comfortable. There was no pressing reason to leave, no reason. We loved it. So when my friend puts this idea in my head, I was like, no thanks. I've found my home. I'm done moving. And with my friend telling me to plant this church, I just kind of, smile and nod and walk away, right? And forget the conversation before I even get to my car. Thing is, I just couldn't shake it. I couldn't shake what he said. And for 6 months, I couldn't shake the thought of, what if I'm saying no to God in addition to my friend? What if this is God calling me to do this? What if this is an opportunity to put my faith into action and I'm ignoring it? So January 2018 took 6 months of me banging my head against it. I would go back to my friend. I'm like, okay, if God is indeed calling me to plant a church, can you help me figure it out? So yeah, he's like, totally. So he gave me a bunch of assessments, all these like really fancy church planting tests. And we spent hundreds of dollars on all of these tests. And Jen and I both, we took multiple super fancy church planting tests. And the results were eye-opening. According to the tests, this is what I'm built to do, according to the tests. And what's even more fascinating is that Jenna's tests showed that she was built to support a church planter. That's what she was built to do. Long story short, I'm going to leave a ton out because we don't have time, but we spent the whole year, 2018, praying about what to do, where to go, when to go, whether we should go at all. And we had opportunities to plant with 4 different church planting organizations, but we didn't feel it was right for various reasons. Long story short, again, we knew we loved Idaho. We decided we were going to look for the darkest part of Idaho spiritually, and our research led us to the Wood River Valley. Guys, this is one of the least Bible-believing counties in the whole state. There's no shortage of spirituality here, Buddhism, Hinduism, New Age, yada, yada, yada. But only 7% of the valley believe and follow the God of the Bible. And God broke our hearts for the lost here, for the valley. And I want you to remember that too, okay? God broke our hearts. So in March 2019, we told our board in Fairfield, hey, God's calling us to do this. And they were not happy, okay? They were not happy. Nick, does it have to be you? I mean, let's find someone else to do it. Let's find a planter to do it, and you can stay here. And we had months of conversation like that, kind of debating about, Nick, you don't have to do this. This isn't, just stay with us, stay in comfort, yada, yada. They just didn't understand why I would want to leave. And finally, June 12th, 2019, after months of serious deliberating with my board and wrestling with them about what we should do, Jenna and I decided we're pulling the trigger. We knew God wanted us to plant a church here. We knew it was urgent. We were ready to go, and it was time. So we pulled the trigger, and it was like, yes! Now what? What do we do here? Again, we didn't want to go with any organizations because we felt like their methods were too rigid or man-made or, without leaving enough room for faith. In other words, we could plant with this organization, but we have to do it exactly this way. And I don't know if it's good, that way is going to work in the Wood River Valley, right? And so it was just Jen and I, basically, because we turned down all those opportunities. Just Jen and I. Our destination is Haley. No help, no funds in the bank. This was the ultimate get out of the boat and have faith that we'll walk on water with Jesus moment. So we quit, and news got out in Fairfield. And Fairfield is a small town. News got out quick, okay? And people were understandably upset about us leaving. It didn't make sense to a lot of people. People were hurt. People were angry. People reacted emotionally. And we had no idea how it was all going to play out at this point. I mean, for all we knew, they were going to drive us out with lamps and pitchforks. And these guys were farmers, okay? They had plenty of lamps and pitchforks. It could have happened, but that's not what happened. In fact, quite the opposite. This is where the first miracle happened. I told my board, I said, I got to do this, I'm going, but I want to give you 6 months' notice. I want to give you 6 months' notice, and I want to help you find my replacement because I don't want there to be any lapse in pastoral coverage. And the board came back to me, and they're like, Nick, that's really nice, but we don't want you to wait until the end of the year. We want you to be done with the church on September 1st, just 3 months from now. And it's at this point I started freaking out. I just started freaking out. 3 months to off-ramp this church and then to on-ramp a plant. Oh man, this is awful. There's so much we have to figure out in 3 months. And they were like, Nick, just calm down. It's going to be good. We want to pay you through the end of the year, 6 months. And we want to give you an additional 2 months pay right now so that you have funds to get the stuff you need for your church plant. God worked in their hearts, softened their hearts to help a pastor who was leaving them We didn't ask for help. We didn't even suggest anything like this to them. They just decided, Nick, come December, we want you devoting 100% of your time to this plant, and we want to fund the equipment, and we want to give you 3 more months' pay after you're done here in September. It's a miracle, okay? It's a miracle because Fairfield is not a rich town. And that church is not a wealthy church. And the locals, just in general, are of the mindset of you're with us or you're against us. It was a miracle because God worked in their hearts, softened their hearts, broke their hearts for what we were doing out here to ensure and wanted to partner with us to ensure that we would have a fighting chance and not be left high and dry the moment things ended in Fairfield. And they were incredibly generous. I would even say supernaturally generous with us, despite that we never asked for help. See, when God calls you to something, you have to trust that he's got it figured out. That's what faith is. It's responding to the call. It's putting your faith into action, saying, God, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but you do, and you're calling me to go, and you want me to go without having any idea how it's going to look. Instead, you're calling me to trust that you have it figured out. And this was a giant indicator to us that God already had it figured out with miracle number 1. Miracle number 2, I had no idea. Sorry, that's jumpy. I had no idea we were going to meet. We only had a few families in Haley that we knew, and they all went to other churches. So we decided we're going to pray for God to provide us with a venue for us to meet. And for 2 weeks, we prayed that God would provide. On Tuesday, June 25th, 2019, we get a call from a woman in town here in Haley named Mitzi. And she's like, hey, I heard you're planning a church. I have an event center, and I want you to use it for free for your church whenever you want. So we drove right up to Haley. We looked at it. It was a small venue, but it was perfect for a brand new budding church. And in the course of 2 hours, we went from having no idea where we were going to meet to having a meeting location for free. That's miracle number 2. God had it figured out. You getting what I'm getting at here? God had it figured out. Here's a picture of us with Mitzi, July 25th, 2019, sitting outside of her event center, 15 East Bullion Street in Haley. So at this point, God provided the funds for a sound system, the venue, and the income to last us through the end of the year. And keep in mind, we never asked anyone for anything. We only ever prayed for God to provide. And I just want to tangent for a moment and say, that if we had sent out donation letters, and people do that, missionaries do that. I'm sure you guys have gotten missionary donation request letters from people. I don't think there's anything wrong with that if that's what they want to do. But if we had done that, we just didn't feel right about it. I don't know why, but we just didn't feel right about it. If we'd sent out donation letters and made calls, if we'd pounded the pavement looking for donors, and if we received funds from those people as a result of all of our arm twisting them, that would have been the result of us trying to get people to help. And again, I know a lot of missionaries do that. I don't fault them. But for us personally, we felt like doing that would have been us trying to solve that problem on our own, under our own steam. However, by choosing to remain silent and simply ask for God to provide, it means that to this day, every blessing at the time from then until today and every miracle that came our way was the result entirely of His working, of His goodness, of His faithfulness to us. We can't take credit for it because we've never asked anyone, we've never twisted any arms. To this day, we've never asked for financial help. It has all been the result of God working in the hearts of people to help, and that's why we give God the glory for it. That's why I believe this is His church. Miracle number 3 is August 14th. We've been having these midweek informational meetings. People would come and ask questions. They'd check us out and ask us things like, do you dance with snakes? Are you mid-trib, pre-trib, post-trib? Are you Calvinist or Arminian? Yada, yada, yada. You got to keep in mind, we're nearly 2 months into trying to get this church off the ground. We've been looking for housing for nearly 2 months as well. And it was bad back then. I mean, it's not as bad as it is today. It's really bad today. But it was still really, really hard. And so what we'd do is we'd call on rentals the moment we heard about them, and every time we got a chance, we'd get passed over by people with fewer kids, people with better credit, people with no pets. And you know what? I don't blame them. I mean, I'd pick most people over the family of 6 with 4 kids, 3 cats, and average credit. Wouldn't you? I mean, come on. So August 14th, we have this meeting. And both Jenna and myself were feeling really deflated. We're actually beginning to wonder, okay, whether this was going to work out. Okay, God, what are you doing here? Is what we kept asking. Are you sure you have this figured out? We need a place to live, God. We'll take anything at this point. We'll live in a 2-bedroom, a 1-bedroom, a studio, a camper, a tent, whatever, God, but we need to be here because we needed to be out of Fairfield by October 1st. Time was ticking. Anyway, we have this meeting August 14th. At the end of it, we ask everybody who came just if they could just keep their eyes out for a possible rental in the area. And after the meeting, a woman who attended the meeting, she comes up to us and she says, I have a 3-bedroom home for rent. It's on 5 acres down Croy Canyon, and I just can't seem to get it rented. We had someone lined up to rent it, and 3 people on a wait list behind that person, but they all backed out. For one reason or another, I just can't get it rented. And I think it's because we're supposed to rent it to you. We love what you're doing. We believe in what you're doing. We want you to succeed. We want you to rent it from us. And since the price of the rent is probably way outside of your budget, she basically was like, name your price. And I told her we could do about 2/3 of what she was asking. She said, done, it's yours. No credit check, no reference check, no background check. It was ours. Miracle number 3, God had it worked out, okay? God worked in the heart of this woman, removed all the competition, closed all of the other doors, and left just one open for this woman, the door between her and us, and she was faithful. God moved in her heart, and because of her faithfulness, in the course of an hour, we went from having no home to having this 3-bedroom house on Croy Canyon. It was beautiful, it was gorgeous, and it was the result of God's hand and only a way that he could do it. Miracle number 4, we never discussed rental deposits. We had no idea what she was going to ask for a rental deposit, and the day that we went down to sign the lease, I was freaking out, right? Freaking out because I knew it was going to come up, of course. And again, family of 6, 4 kids, average credit, 3 cats. It would not surprise me if it was going to be a massive deposit. She certainly was within her right to ask me for a big deposit, and I only had like $400 extra in my bank account that day. So if it was going to be anything over $400, we would not have been able to pay it, and it would have been a difficult conversation. Like, can I, spread this out over 3, rent payments or something? It just would have been difficult, right? Well, we get there, we go through the lease, and the deposit section is blank. So I asked her the amount that she would like for a deposit, and she's like, right. And there was this pause. And guys, I was convinced it was like 10 hours, and I held my breath the whole time begging for her, please just put me out of my misery, right? And she's like, yeah, how about like $300? Miracle number 4, I only had $400. God knew I only had $400, and we signed the lease. God moved in her heart to say, you know what, we'll do $300. We paid the first month's rent. We paid the $300 deposit. It was ours. God had it figured out. God knew what was in my bank account, and he worked in her heart and her life to make sure that it was going to work out. Miracle number 4. Miracle number 5, I bought like 8 church planting books. And I read through them all. And the books had some really insightful, clever things to do. Things like those midweek informational meetings. We got that idea from the book. And so these books, they would say that the best time to start meeting on Sundays, like to launch your church, the best time to do it is after the first of the year or Easter, because those are generally the most well attended, apparently. So we're planning on having first service on the first Sunday in January of 2020. The thing is, these books said that these midweek informational meetings, they were designed specifically to generate interest and traction, right? To kind of like build in these midweek meetings, and then you launch on Sunday. But we were having the opposite happen, okay? The more midweek meetings that we had, the less people wanted to come out. The first midweek meeting, we had like 26 people, and then we had 20 people, and then we had 14, then 10, and then 4. And I'm thinking, man, this is not how it's supposed to be going here, right? I mean, the books are saying we're doing the wrong thing. It's November 2019 at this point. We're supposed to launch in January, just 6 weeks away. How are we going to launch with 4 people? With 4 people, and that's when I called a very good friend of mine. His name is Gary. And Gary, by the way, all on his own, he's a gift from God in my life. We spent probably 2 hours on the phone, and I told him the methods I'm reading about in these books and that they're just not working. And Gary tells me, he's like, you need to get rid of the books, and you need to forget what they said to do. And I told him, I'm like, no, but they're so insightful, man. They're clever. I mean, they're really creative. And apparently, according to this book, if I ring these bells and I blow these whistles, just as it says to do in these books, if I follow this formula, the church is going to grow. And Gary's like, so how's that working out for you? And it wasn't. We did the Facebook advertising, we did the free dinners, we twisted people's arms to come, but eventually everybody was either busy or they would just say, well, just tell me when you guys start on Sundays. So Gary said, Nick, you're trying to do it in a man-made way. You're trying to figure it out on your own. Don't you remember God had figured out? So forget the books, forget the launch. God gave you the venue, he gave you the sound system, and most importantly, he gave you the calling. So just use what God gave you. Just use it. Start using it. And have faith that he's got it figured out. So November 17th, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, literally the worst possible Sunday to start meeting as a church, we had our first Sunday service. And we didn't do any advertising. We didn't try to do any slick Facebook. We didn't spend any money on Facebook advertising, anything like that. We didn't twist anybody's arms. We just told 2 people that we were going to do it. And 29 people showed up. Then 32. Then 36. Then 41. Miracle number 5. Speaking with Gary, remembering that this was God's church, not the result of man, so that no man can boast. It was a wake-up call for me that I can't be the one to do this. It can't be my plan. It has to be God's plan because God's the one who's leading. God's the one who's in charge, and God's got it figured out, and I just needed to get out of the way. I needed to get out of the way. I needed to see those books fail. Do you understand? That was a learning experience for me. Those books had to fail because in order for God's church to succeed, in order for God's kingdom to be brought forth in the Wood River Valley, he needed to be the one to do it, and he is the one who deserves the glory. So miracle number 5, when we get out of the way and choose to be mere custodians of God's church, that was when we started to see growth and takeoff. Miracle number 6. It's the end of the year. My income is ending from the Fairfield church. I've got no idea what I'm going to do. I get a call from someone who'd been attending our church at the time. His name was Chris. He's an awesome guy. I love his heart, a great person. Anyway, he's part owner of a conversion van company in Bellevue, and they have an opening in their woodworking department. I got a lot of experience in woodworking. I've built furniture over the years. It's a definite skill. So December 28th, just 3 days before my income was to end from Fairfield, he calls me down to his shop and he gives me a tour of the place. I tell him it's really amazing what they're doing with these Mercedes vans, and I'd love to apply for the job. He's like, no need to apply. The job is yours. Start January 1st. And in the course of an hour, we went from having no idea how I was going to get income to having a full-time job that paid just enough to cover our bills at the right time, doing work, by the way, that is totally in alignment with my gift of woodworking. I worked there for 4 months, and it was some of the most fun, non-ministry work I've ever done. And to this day, I still keep in contact with the guys I worked with, and whenever I go down there, they're always like, "Hey, Nick, what's up, man? Good to see you." Miracle number 6, God provided me with a stable, well-paying job at just the right time. You got to keep in mind, we're taking these risks, and we're jumping off the boat and onto the water with Jesus here, and every single time it's working. It's working. And God is with us, and God is being faithful to us as a result of us trying to make a difference here in this valley. God, it's been amazing to see the fact that God had it all figured out. Miracle number 7, the pandemic. Well, the pandemic wasn't the miracle. But what happened as a result was a miracle. March 16th, I think it was March 16th, the shop that I was working with, they had to shut down because I think everything was shutting down. I got COVID. I was one of the first. Our family got COVID. We were among the first in the valley to get it. The PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection loans, hadn't been handed out yet. Our church was only 5 months old at this point. We had no idea what the shutdown was going to do with our momentum. So when everyone was freaking out, we chose to remember that God still had it figured out, that God was not surprised by the pandemic. And we had some people in our church suggest, hey, you need to file for a PPP loan. But because our organization was less than a year old, we didn't qualify anyway. And besides, I've never been one to take government help. I don't know, it's just me. Again, not against anybody who does it, but for me, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to take government help for our church. Why? Because it's God's church. We have a God in heaven who is not surprised by the pandemic, who is not limited on his resources, but who has the whole world in his hands and is carefully and thoughtfully working in the lives of every individual in the church, including me and my family. So I once again had to trust, okay, God, you've got this figured out. So at the end of March, I get a phone call from someone in our church. And they said, Nick, we know that the shutdown may affect you negatively, but we also know that God is going to work in your church despite the pandemic. And we believe God is calling us to help you, and that now is the time for you to give this church your full attention. And God has moved in our hearts to personally fund a full-time salary for you for the next year. So April 2019, everyone's freaking out. The whole world is shut down. Countless people are going late on bills. They're trying to file for paycheck protection loans. They're waiting on stimulus checks. Meanwhile, our church, this church, received nearly 20 grand in donations in April 2020. We got a Holy Spirit PPP loan. And from that point forward, our church has never had to worry about funds. Never had to worry about finances. We've never been in need as a church financially all through this pandemic. And again, we have never asked for financial help. It's all God. It's all God working in the hearts of his people to help his church continue and to thrive even in the midst of a pandemic. And miracle number 7, it was God working in the hearts of these people to fund my salary for the next year. Miracle number 8. That's this thing, man, it's ruining the surprise. When we could start meeting again in person, the Idaho mandate stated that we could only meet outside. We were desperate to start meeting in person again. We knew it was going to become possible on May 10th, ironically Mother's Day, but we didn't have a venue anymore, again, because we needed to be outside. We couldn't use the venue that had been provided to us. Oh yeah, God gave us that home on 5 acres. We had land outside. Guys, we began meeting at our rental home down Croy Canyon, and that's what that picture is. Every Sunday, we'd set up the sound system. We'd set up tents. We'd set up chairs. And people would fill the driveway of our rental, and we would worship God together in person. This is a miracle. It's a miracle because God knew what was going to happen with the pandemic. God knew that we would be able to meet in person again in May, and God knew that it would only be outside, and that's why I'm convinced to this day, that's why God provided us with that place to begin with. God knew we were going to need the land. He knew it, and he had it all figured out. And once again, this rental property answered a prayer in a wonderfully providential, sovereign way that can only be explained by the orchestration of a God in heaven who is working carefully and thoughtfully to grow his church in the Wood River Valley. Miracle number 9. Remember, there are 10. We're almost done. The people who were renting, we were renting the house from, ended up selling their other house, and they needed to move back into the house they were renting to us. The house that we were using as a home, the house that we were using as a place to meet as a church. They were very kind. They were very generous. They gave us 50 days notice to find another place to live and to meet as a church. There was no animosity or frustration. They were not upset with us or anything. In fact, I still consider these people to be dear friends to this day. I'm pretty sure they're coming over this afternoon to our house to hang out. We're good, okay? Nothing was wrong. They just sold their other house and no longer needed to rent that house to us anymore. So we start looking and looking and looking some more. We had a few promising opportunities, but nothing came up. And not only did we need to find a place for us to live, but also a place for the church to meet. And that was when one of the people in our church found out about this building, this one, right here. And we looked at a couple other commercial buildings, and we learned that, for buildings about this size, people generally want $3,000 to $4,000 in rent per month for the buildings that we were looking at. Also, it's pretty common when you sign a lease for a commercial building, they want to see like a 3 or a 5 year lease. And not only that, they usually want multiple thousands of dollars as a deposit, and they normally want us to pay triple net, right, which is utilities. Understandable, we should pay our own utilities, cover maintenance fees and upkeep, and taxes. It's called triple net. 3 things we need to pay for: utilities, upkeep, taxes, triple net. So when this building came up in August of last year, we met with the landlord, we toured the place, and we could see how everything might come together well, right? Okay, we'll use this as a sanctuary. We can use that as a kids' room, small group room, closet. We can do this. And we asked the landlord how much she wanted. And she was like, how about $2,000 per month? And I thought, okay, great, I love it. All right, we're already saving $1,000 over other places in town. Okay, that sounded pretty sweet to me. And then I asked her about lease terms. And I told her, I'm like, since we're a church in the middle of a pandemic, we don't know what the future holds. We don't know if we're going to need the building long term. Of course, I'm hoping we'll grow, but you never know. And I told her, I said, I don't know if I can sign a 3-year lease just because of how tumultuous things were going in the world at the time. And she says, I totally get it. How about a 3-month lease that goes month to month in perpetuity? And I was like, okay, well, wow, what? How awesome is that? And then I asked her about the triple net, utilities, upkeep, and taxes. She's like, you know what? We are going to pay all your utilities. We are going to pay the upkeep. We're going to do all that. You don't need to worry. Just a fixed amount, $2,000 per month, whether you run the heat or the air or not. And I just thought, man, well, how awesome. And then I asked about the deposit. Well, there was some office furniture in here. And she's like, hey, you know what? If you just take this office furniture to the dump, we don't need a deposit from you. And the best part, we had a person in our church step up and say, I'm going to pay the rent through the end of 2020. So in the course of a couple of days, we went from having no idea where the church would meet to signing a commercial lease that is unheard of. It is unheard of in this day and age, and having the rent paid for through the end of the year. Miracle number 9, where God worked in the hearts of multiple people to open doors, to create a safe and stable venue for people to gather and worship together. That's a miracle. Miracle number 10, save the best for last. So the church now has a place to meet, but we still had no idea where we were going to live, right? Like I said earlier, we had a couple options come up but then disappear, and finally 3 days before we needed to be out of that rental home, we had a dear friend, Mick Halverson. He came to us and he's like, hey, I own a restaurant down in Bellevue. It's that red A-frame. You guys probably know of it, Brandy's, which is now Lucy's. And there's a small apartment upstairs that you could live in the meantime. So it took a little convincing, you know, like, I don't know, should we just wait the 3 days, or should we, you know, like, oh man, should we do this? I don't know. It took a little convincing, but we took it and we moved in that evening. Thing is, we knew it wasn't going to be long term, so we actually put most of our stuff in storage. We brought only the bare essentials to this little apartment, mattresses on the floor. Kids ate all their meals on paper plates using cardboard boxes and coolers as tables. It was actually a huge shock to us. I mean, we went from that 5-acre property and a beautiful 3-bedroom custom home to the second floor of a restaurant that was for sale. And to make matters more dire, the restaurant went under contract just a few days after we moved in. And luckily, it was set to close escrow in January, so it was like, okay, at least we have 4 months to figure it out. Now, as I look back on that time today, like, man, that was a huge blessing. To have that place to live was a total blessing. But while we were in the middle of it, while we were living there, we were like, what are you doing, God? I mean, why such a wild shift in housing? I mean, sure, God was providing, God had a plan, but we genuinely wondered whether this was going to work out. We didn't know. God, are you sure you're going to work this one out? Despite all the miracles that had happened up to this point, we still didn't know what was going to happen next. And I began to wonder, okay, everything else is getting established. The church is doing great. There's money in the church bank account. We got a building to meet at. But God, you're not getting us established. Are we not supposed to stay? We really began asking those questions. Did you have us come and plant this church and do all this stuff for us and with us, only for us to hand it off to someone else now? What do you want, God? What are you doing? And we went through 2 months of that, of just like questioning, God, what are you doing? And God, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to stay or should we go? What the heck is going on? And I've always told God I'll do anything for him as long as he can provide for my family. And although he was indeed providing, it didn't feel like it at the time. And we didn't know what was going to come next, when the gavel was going to drop and we were going to need to find another place to live again. So after 2 months of wrestling and doubting, Jen and I just decided, you know what? We're going to go for broke on this church. God, you've provided us a place to live, and although it isn't what we were hoping for, although it really wasn't up to our expectations, it is what you have given to us. And by the way, how often it is that our expectations get in the way, right? Of God providing something like the second floor of a restaurant and us turning our nose up to it and be like, no, my expectations are higher than that. It's usually our expectations that get in the way. And I think that's what what God was trying to show us, was that, hey, God, you've provided us a place to live, and although it isn't what we were hoping for, it's what you've given us. And we need to be at peace about it. We needed to come to a point, literally, where our housing didn't matter anymore. We needed to reach a point in our faith in God having it figured out in such a way that even if January came and we needed to be out of that little restaurant apartment, that God was going to provide, and we needed to figure out a way, we needed to figure out that we needed to be at peace about where we were at and where we were going, no matter what it looked like, and we needed to let go of what we thought it should look like. And guys, that's when we got to experience the greatest miracle we have ever seen in our lives. A few weeks after we found peace about not having our own home or even long-term housings, some friends of ours, they invited us over to dinner. And during our time together, we told them about all that God had done for us and through us, and how he'd been using us to grow his church. We told them about how God is moving supernaturally. We told them about the miracles that we'd witnessed up to this point. And at the end of the night, they just said, well, how can we pray for you? And we told them, we're like, we just need a place to live. But you know what? We're at peace about that now. We're at peace about God providing. We knew he had a plan, and it was just a matter of us trusting him. A week passes, and the same couple call us back. They tell us that God moved in their hearts to do two things. First, that they were going to make a donation to our church that would cover my salary for 2 years. One check. It's not monthly. We're going to cover your salary for 2 years. We don't want you to worry about how you're going to buy food for 2 years. And second, they told us that God moved in their hearts to buy us a home, guys. To buy us a home. And this is like Miracle on 34th Street type stuff. I mean, like, what? What? Buy us a home? I mean, we openly wept together for days. I mean, the thought that we wouldn't ever have to worry again about where our kids are going to lay their heads at night or where we're going to lay our heads at night, a place that we can truly, genuinely call our own, a place without landlords, a place the bank can't take away. I mean, really? Truly? A real life, actual home of our own that we get to call our own? And none of it went through the church either, okay? There was some debate about that earlier this year. No, none of it went through the church. This person did not receive a tax write-off for it. It did not a cent touched the church. They even had to pay gift taxes on this transaction. It was meant to be 100% our home. And every time we thanked these people, they corrected me and they said, no, Nick, this is not from us. We'll say it again. God moved in our hearts to do this. This is a gift from God, and he is the one who deserves your thanks. Now, some of you may already know we went shopping for a house, and every door still kept closing on us. Every door kept closing. We'd go outbid, or a house would go into escrow right as we're preparing an offer for a realtor, and only one door opened, and that door was the old animal shelter in Haley, the one across the street from the new animal shelter down Croy Canyon. It needed a lot of work. It was and still is in really rough shape, but there is a ton of potential. And by the way, if things ever got weird with the pandemic again, we have the room there. We could meet as a church there, indoors or outdoors. Okay, so we bought it and we decided day one, this shelter is a gift from God. We're going to use it in service to God. We got a lot of plans. Like I said, we could use it as a secondary location for our church if things get weird again. I could go on and on. We got a lot of ideas, but this was God who always knew, who always had it figured out, and we just needed to trust him. Miracle number 10, the greatest miracle we have ever seen in our lives, okay? My life is a living testimony of what happens when God calls you outside of your comfort zone and you answer. My life is proof. I am living proof of what happens when you trust God in everything, when you let him work, when you let him have control over your life. And this is what happens when you let him have all the glory as he moves. I'm going to close my message this morning by straining to tell you there is a God in heaven. He is working today in the 21st century, that he does have the whole world in his hands, and that he is good, and that he is with you, and that he does want to know you, that he has a plan for your life. It's tailor-made. It's custom-made just for you. And if only we would step outside of our comfort zones, if only we would leave the comforts of our own personal Fairfield, if only we would stand up and answer the call, if only we would get off the bench, we would have the supernatural privilege, guys, of working with God actively instead of passively. That we would be used by God to change the world, to change eternity for people where before they were on a trajectory for eternal pain and suffering, but they're now on a trajectory for heaven. We get to be part of that change, guys. We get to be part of God's work. Guys, if we would only respond, if only we could move forward in faith, that we might be able to see a worldwide revival of faith in our lifetimes, of God working in our hearts and in the hearts of the lost to realize his goodness, to realize the freedom available to him, to realize there is a God in heaven who can take away the sins of the world. We have it. We have it. We know the answer, but it requires us getting off of our rear ends and into the game. And if you want to know the call God has placed on your life, I'm just going to ask you a very simple question, and it's this. What thing is happening in the world that is breaking my heart? What thing is happening in the world that is breaking my heart? That's what started this whole church, a broken heart for the lost in the Wood River Valley. To see so many people in this valley think that it's all about accumulating stuff. It's all about having a perfect body, right? It's all about amassing wealth. It's all about keeping up perfect appearances, keeping up with the Joneses. None of that matters because none of it's going to come with us to heaven. Even the house we now have, this old animal shelter, it's not eternal. So while we're here, we need to have it with open hands, right? Lord, you gave it to us. You could take it away. And while we have it, we got to use it in service in every possible way for God and in every way that we know how, because it's all his. It's all his. Everything is his, and he gets the glory. But back to the question, what is happening in the world that is breaking my heart? What do you know, and what have you seen that is a very clear need in the world? It could be a need for a new orphanage to be opened in Mexico. I don't know, I'm just shooting from the hip here, okay? Most people look at the homeless issue in San Francisco, California, and think, oh my gosh, that's horrible. Somebody needs to do something. What if that person is you? Who can serve the homeless in San Francisco? I don't know. It could be human trafficking. It could be youth. It could be feeding low-income families. What is it? What is that thing that when you look at it, you say, no, this can't happen anymore? Because my story is all about people who saw what we were doing, and God broke their hearts for us. God broke the hearts of the board at the Fairfield Church, and they responded by helping us financially. God broke the heart of the woman who owned that rental home and provided us with a home for way less than she could have gotten somewhere else. God broke the hearts of the people who helped us with the income, the people who helped us sign the commercial lease and on this building, which is just totally bonkers, by the way. God broke the hearts of the people who saw that we were pretty much homeless and made a way for us to live here, to be here in the Wood River Valley for good, where our home now is a stronghold the enemy has no power over. These are people who allowed God to break their hearts, to move their hearts to action which brought them outside of their comfort zones, but action that made God's church here what it is today. And I'm going to implore you to pray this week. Pray. Ask God to break your heart. And when he does, because he will, he's going to break your heart for something if you ask him. Trust me, I know from experience. If your heart breaks, don't ignore it. Do something. It could be the very thing that God is calling you to. And if you're worried about time, or if you're worried about energy, if you're worried about your resources, I'm just going to ask you to rewind this message and listen back to the fact that you and I have a God with unlimited resources, a God who totally has it all figured out. And when he tells you to do something and you do it, God will totally provide all of your needs according to the riches of his glory. That's Philippians 4:19 right there. It's going to be good. It's going to be worth it. It's going to change eternity for people, and you can sit on the bench or you can get in the game. You can look at your faith and think, yeah, my faith is about believing in God and going to church once a week, or you can put your faith into action and say, put me into the game. I'm ready to score some points against the enemy today because I know I'm on the winning team. Bow with me in prayer. Lord, we know that you are calling us to something. Lord, if it's to feeding the hungry, Lord, and we see somebody in the supermarket who can't pay the bill on the at the check stand. Lord, move in our hearts if that's what you want, to pay it for them or something like that. Lord, if we see people in need, because there's a lot of brokenness in this world, Lord, I pray you would break our hearts, because we know that's one of the indicators of you calling us to action. To see a situation like a car that's broken down on the side of the road. We know that situation, Lord, that when we pass by somebody who's broke down on the side of the road, we got only two choices. We can pull over and help, or we can pray somebody else will. And so, Lord, show us the cars that are broken on the side of the road, and move in our hearts for one of those things. Lord, that we would either pull over or keep going and pray somebody else will. Lord, break our hearts in a way that when we see those scenarios, that we are the ones who pull over and help. And that when we think about the potential loss in time or in resources, Lord, remind us of Philippians 4:19, that you provide according to the riches of your glory. That when we are working for you, in service to you, when we are being faith-filled to your call on our lives, Lord, keep us motivated, keep us going, keep our hearts broken for the lost. Lord, that we might partner with you, that we might fulfill our calling. It doesn't need to be as wild as planting a church in the Wood River Valley, but it could be. Lord, give us the boldness in knowing you, that our lives may become living testimonies of your goodness, of the fact that you have it figured out. Remind us that we're on your team, and that through you we can get off the bench and score some points against the enemy. We know that you are victorious in all things. And so we bow in obedience to you, and we ask for the privilege of participating with you in furthering your kingdom for your sake and for your glory, and that every time we experience miracles of any kind, large and small, Lord, that we might give you the glory, that we might bear witness and be a testimony that you are still working in ways only you can today. It's in your name. Amen. Let's stand and close with always good. Always good. You meet me on the mountain top. You see me in the valley low. There is no home without you here. I find you in the quested thoughts. You quiet all the question marks. There is no space your love won't fill. I'll trade all my fear for peace of mind. and all my heaviness for burdens light. And this will be my song, that you are always good. I sing it all day long, that you are always good. And when the day is through, I am left with you, are always, you are always good. And I'll set my eyes on perfect faith. You'll finish what you start in me. My heart will be an offering. I'll trade all my fear for peace of mind. All my heaviness for burdens light. And this will be my song, that you are always good. I'll sing it all day long, that you are always good. And when the day is through, I am left with you, are always, you are always. Every melody you're singing back to me, you're singing back. And every melody you're singing back to me, you're singing back. Traded all my fear for peace of mind. And you took heaviness, my burdens light. This will be my song, that you are always good. I'll sing it all day long, that you are always good. And when the day is through, I am left with you, are always, you are always good. Amen, amen. Well, thank you so much for coming today and let me share all that. I pray that God would break your heart. I want to see you next week. Bye now. You're dismissed.